Cyberdash is a 2D platformer with a twist. The player is being constantly chased and must keep making forward progress to survive. The initial inspiration for Cyberdash comes from Sonic the Hedgehog 3. In this stage, there's an enormous wall that chases the player, and if it gets too close it'll crush them against other stage obstacles. It's a really memorable set piece in the game and provides the player with a good 30 seconds or so of constant upheld threat. The obstacles in this section of the game are generally quite easy to avoid, but they're all designed around slowing the player down and letting the real obstacle, the wall, do its work most efficiently. Other games, like Ori and the Blind Forest, use chase sequences like this to test the player on the abilities that they've learned thus far as well. And this entire sequence must be completed from beginning to end with no checkpoints, to act as a real test of player skill. A lot of game mechanics in Downwell serve multiple purposes, most notably the gunfire, which acts as both a way of destroying enemies and of slowing your descent down the well. Another idea I wanted to explore was to have the player's gunfire serve two purposes, and although it didn't reach the final game, in an earlier build of Cyberdash it was possible to shoot the laser behind you to slow it down. During testing though, players didn't know they were able to do this without being explicitly told. And in addition, when they did do this, because they had to turn around and fire the laser behind them, they stopped their forward momentum, and it just made the entire game far too difficult. Early playtesting revealed that the game was too hard, and so some changes were made. The first change I made was due to a bad piece of design on my part. These large red walls that the player has to destroy initially didn't let the player pass them unless they were completely dissolved and their animation had finished. Now, when the walls are shot, the player can pass them immediately, instead of bumping into them. Secondly, there's now a small pink elevator underneath the red wall after this jump. This way, if the player doesn't destroy the wall before they clear the jump, they're not immediately killed. But the biggest change made after playtesting was to the laser itself. Previously, the laser moved at a set speed. After the changes I made, the laser now chases the player at a different speed based on how well they're doing. If a player is doing really well and progressing through the level very quickly, then the laser will catch up to them faster as well. However, if a player is lagging behind and making mistakes, then the laser will be more forgiving and ease off a little. Ori and the Blind Forest's chase sequences also do this. As seen here in the Jinzo Tree escape sequence, the water will catch up to the player faster if they're doing well, but as the player reaches more difficult sections and they slow down, so too will the water. This provides the correct level of tension without feeling overwhelming to the player. Redesigning the game's core mechanic around this also had an unintended side benefit. Now that the laser had a variable speed based on player performance, it allowed me the freedom to be slightly less precise when calculating where the player would be in level at a particular time. This meant that I could make sections easier or more difficult without having to worry as much about how it would affect the player's time. These conveyor belts were quite a late addition to the game. While they would pose very little threat in any other game, in Cyberdash they add a lot of tension because they slow the player down. Prior to the introduction of these, the only other ways of slowing the player down were via the on-off lasers and moving platforms and waiting for them to arrive. And while these are all fine ways of slowing the player down, I prefer using the conveyor belts where I can. I feel like it's a better idea to keep the player in motion where possible, especially since they're being chased. The chase laser is Cyberdash's core concept, and everything in the game stems from that idea. Every other obstacle in the game, from moving platforms, lifts, destructible walls, on-off lasers, teleporters, conveyor belts and pits, is designed to fit around that core concept of the laser chasing the player. Even the placement of the collectibles is designed to lure the player into areas where they'll be put under more tension by the chasing laser. This means that every new mechanic that's been added to the game so far has all gone back to feeding into that core concept. Not a single mechanic in Cyberdash works against that core concept. It's all designed to work together and feed into itself. However, throughout much of development, I did spend a lot of development time coming up with ideas for new level gimmicks, then coding and implementing them, rather than coming up with solid level designs. And given that the final game only has a scant 2 levels, I can see this as a massive weakness for my development process. As well as shifting time towards developing level ideas before implementing stage mechanics, another change I could have made during development was to focus more on giving the player interesting abilities to use rather than just jumping and shooting. In the games I've used as inspiration, Ori, Sonic and Downwell, each player character has unique moves that make them fun to play as. The character in Downwell has his gumboots, Sonic can roll around and use slopes to accelerate, and Ori has a massive number of moves that are too numerous to list here. But despite some developmental missteps, I'm overall quite happy with how the game turned out. I'm also perfectly happy to continue development past this point. Some ideas I have for later development include the introduction of an endless mode and the possibility of an Android release, with the game's simple control scheme lending itself quite well to mobile devices. At the end of the day, the feedback I've received tells me that Cyberdash is a fun game and I had fun making it. Unity has been an absolute pleasure to work with, and I feel like I've learned a lot over the course of the project. Links to both my development blog and the release on itch.io are available in the description. Thanks for watching.